Hi, really happy to be here and speaking to you. And today I'm going to give you a window into our invisible world, uh, a world that's so important for our food, health, and well-being, and something that we have overlooked. Uh, our body is more than just our body. Our body is actually influenced by a lot of these microbial communities that we can't see with our naked eye. We can only see through our microscopes. And now it's very clear that every part of our living system, from the soil, from the plants, from the food we eat, and our own body, we are dependent on this microbial community that has been on this earth for billions of years, much more than us. And today they are a very important part of us and our well-being. So I'm going to give you a little bit of insight into this and how food that we eat and this microbiome interacts so that we can have good health. And so we can now, in a way, develop beverages, develop food, so that these good microbe can be sustained and can nurture us and can give us good health and help us beat diseases. So that's a window into which I will give you how our good health is based on good food and how our good food is based on good microbiome. So with that in perspective, I also have, in addition to Alison, our research associate, Deepan, who some of you have seen through the CERT program and will see again. And so let's begin. Next slide. So in the next slide, we are at a very interesting time on this planet. Today, we are about 7 billion people, and by 2050, we'll be about 9 billion people. And suddenly, since 2001, we are not dying from infections, but we are dying from food and environmental type diseases, diabetes, heart disease, from these excess calorie disease. These are the diseases that are the biggest public health problems. And they come from the imbalances in our diet. And it's affecting the indigenous communities all over the world much more than the rest of the communities. So this new global crisis in food and food-related diseases is the biggest challenge that we face. At the same time, we have exciting advances in understanding of biology, like the microbiome, and we have information technology that helps us to gather all the good information about science and how this understanding of new biology and the information technology and how we can understand our environment, our need for moving away from energy sources to renewable energy, and the need for fresh water, all of these interacting elements, we need a new, fresh approach to look at it as a whole system, meaning each of these pieces impact the other, and ultimately they impact our health and well-being. So we are at a time, we cannot look at these problems individually, but we have to look at it as a whole, as a system. So we are in the era of systems biology, where individual components are interacting with each other. And these interactions are important. And when we understand these interactions, then we can have better environment, better water, better energy, and better food. So in terms of food and health, it's not only the food balance that's important, but also the microbiome that's interacting with this food is important. So that's the point I'm trying to make. And so this paradigm or this knowledge of the microbiome is important at every facet of these different components of the environment and how the environment then influences us. So let's dig deeper into this. Next slide. So if you look at our food challenge worldwide, we are 7 billion people now. We're going to be by 2050, we'll be 9 billion people. By the end of the century, we'll be about 10 or 11 billion. So today, we are about 7 billion, but we have enough calories for 12 billion people. And so we have food surplus. But most of that food is this super high hyper-processed carbohydrates. So that's not good. And therefore, we are suffering from excess calorie diseases, meaning we are suffering from preventable, non-communicable chronic disease, meaning type 2 diabetes, heart disease. And therefore, one of the big burdens we are facing is we have too many calories, and therefore we are getting this increasing amount of preventable chronic diseases. At the same time, we have 1 billion on this planet who are still hungry, who are not getting enough of these calories. So at the same time, we have twin problems. One hand, we have a population in the world that's not getting enough calories. But then so many of us are getting too many calories. So if you see the diseases today, the fastest growing disease on the planet today is type 2 diabetes, from the super refined carbohydrates that we are feeding ourselves. At the same time, while we still feed our hungry, while we still try to get good food that does not make us sick like in diabetes, we also have to produce this food with a changing climate. So that's very important. At the same time, we also need the countermeasures to bad foods, which are fruits and vegetables. So today, for example, in America, we have an average of 1 servings of fruit and vegetable a day, when we should be having 7 to 10 to have good health. And what happens to this pellet of food that we need in abundance? They go waste because they have too much water. So one of the big problems of food security and health is wasting of this good fruits and vegetables that we need to have in abundance. And therefore, in our institute here in North Dakota State University, we want to address 4 major global problems. 1, have enough food for the hungry in the world. Number 2, make this food of high quality so that we do not get these chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes and heart disease. Number 3, produce these abundant food with the changing climate. Make them environmentally resistant, more resilient. And number 4, improve the abundance of fruits and vegetables and how we preserve them so that we have these antidotes or countermeasures against high-calorie diseases like diabetes. So the more fruits and vegetables we eat, that's the biggest take-home message today. Eat more fruits and vegetables. They're good for you. They are good for the good bacteria that we have, or the good microbiome that we have, which I will discuss in a few minutes. So therefore, these 4 major challenges are the solutions to the major problems that we have. Feeding the world abundant of the macro and micronutrients, then also not having bad calories or these hyper-processed calories that gives us type 2 diabetes and too much sugar and too much carbohydrate. They are bad. And so how do you balance them so that you have less cancer risk, less diabetes risk, less heart disease risk, less lung disorders? All of these are preventable. And with good food, we can have a better balance to prevent these diseases. Third, how do you produce these food with the changing climate? And 4, how do we prevent waste of this good food that we need, fruits and vegetables in abundance, so that they're well preserved, but also they now give us good health because they contain compounds like antioxidants that they fight the bad side of these calories. So that's in a nutshell of these challenges. And within this, next slide please, we will look at the world today. So if you look at the world today, As I told you, we still have malnourishment in many parts of the world, especially around this mid-region, around the equator. But suddenly, we have a new problem around the world, and the new problem is we have too many calories, and they are refined food-based calories, and these calories, when we take too much with less exercise and less fruits and vegetables, they increase our chronic disease, starting with type 2 diabetes, and then it proceeds to cardiovascular disease, it can proceed to cancer, it can proceed down to dementia and mental disorders. So all these are connected, and it can primarily be influenced by the bad food we consume. So it's not only enough to have enough calories, but we need to have good calories, not this hyper-processed calories that can then lead to many of these chronic disease breakdowns. So if you see the world, we are in a new challenge of food security, meaning we still need to feed the hungry, but also we need to have good quality food that prevents chronic disease. It's not enough just to have calories, but we need to have good calories. Calories that do not lead to breakdown towards chronic disease. So this is in a nutshell. Today, as a result of this imbalance, we have close to 400 million diabetics around the world. And this number is growing very rapidly. And within our country, our communities in the indigenous communities within America and within different parts of the world like Australia and New Zealand and other parts of the world, they are suffering more. They are given this abundant refined calories that shouldn't be in the diet. We should have a more balanced diet. As a result of which, not only the world is suffering from this increasing diabetes rate, but other communities, specific communities like our indigenous communities are suffering even more. So we need to understand this problem and work towards solutions. And we will discuss those solutions in a minute. Next slide, please. So if you look at this, one important point that I want to make today is that in providing these solutions, we are now realizing that the biological life on this planet is not what only is visible, but there's a lot of invisible things. In the soil, there are a lot of microbiome, or there's those biological life that we cannot see with our eyes, which are microscopic. They're important for good soils. And the good soils feed and develop good plants and and animals, which are part of our food system. So even the plants and animals need these invisible microbiome that we do not see. And our ecosystem all over, in the leaves, they all have this microbiome. And most importantly, we are seeing now this good microbiome is a part of our good health. If we feed good fiber and good fruits and vegetables, then our microbiome is fed well, and our good bacteria are happy, and those good bacteria give us good health. So this human microbiome and diet interactions are very important. So the more fiber, the more beans, and more fruits and vegetables that you eat, then you feed not only do they give you good nutrients, but they also feed this favorable good bacteria that are important for health. So when we eat too many bad calories, then we favor the bad bacteria that do not give us good health. But when we eat the good, right, balanced food, a very diverse diet, then they feed our good bacteria. So this good bacteria is one of the most important technology platform for good health and good diet and good health and well-being. So that's the take-home message. So we need to eat a balanced diet, not only to give us the good nutrients like proteins and carbohydrates and lipids or fats and minerals and vitamins, but they also need to give us good fiber, good other components that feed a good microbiome. The good microbiome then nourishes us. So the more good quality our microbiome is, better our dental health, better our heart health, better our gut health. Every part of the body is influenced by this good microbiome. And the more better we eat, the better our microbiome is. So let's continue on this. So when you continue, here's a nice slide about this. So here are lots of fruits and vegetables. They themselves have good nutrients beyond just the macronutrients and micronutrients. They also have other bioactive compounds like antioxidants. So these fruits and vegetables, they are in themselves supporting our tissues to be healthy and well balanced. But in addition, they feed these nice good bacteria in your system. They feed us, but also they feed this good bacteria that harmonizes with us, that lives with us, makes us happy. Okay? So this interaction of food and a good microbiome give us good gut health. Then our good gut health improves our overall metabolism, our overall well-being, improves our immunity, ability to fight disease. And then we can also manage all sorts of disease from diabetes, heart disease, to every other disease. And therefore, this take-home message, we have good macronutrient balance that support the good microbiome in your system. Okay, so remember that the microbiome, this ancient world of ours, is still a part of us, that still nourishes us, that keeps us healthy. And so we need to feed it. We not just feed ourselves, but we also have to feed our part of us, this microbiome that's integral part of us. Next slide, please. So if we now look at it, as we look at technology, it's not just of the genome or the genetic material that's important, but how that genetic material sends out other messages like transcriptomes and proteomes. So they all interact. So they all interact with the environment. So the environment tells this genetics and the component genome and the components to start interacting. And the microbiome also does the same. So this combination of your cells and the microbiome sending out the genetic information to a whole series of information, then in a systems way, in an overall way, start interacting with the world and start giving us good information, yeah, and good health. Okay. So this information beyond the genome and linked to the environment, linked to our microbiome, is the most important advancement in medicine and health that we need to make. Okay. So it is very central. Good health means good food. Good food means good microbiome. Next question. Next slide. So with this, what is wrong with our food today? There are three things that are wrong in the food today. One, most of the food, the energy that we get and burn in our body happens in an organelle called mitochondria. Remember that. Our body has mitochondria. It is in the mitochondria that the energy is taken out to give it to all cells of the body. Every cell in our body has a mitochondria. So our diet today, our food, we do not consider that. We do not consider where the food is burned to give us energy. So this is one of the important breakdowns. So we need to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables to prevent this breakdown, because fruits and vegetables and beans, they have compounds that protect the mitochondria, that protect the bad reactions of the mitochondria. So we have not considered that in our diet. So when we eat more fruits and vegetables, we protect the mitochondria. So this protection against oxygen function, which is in the mitochondria to get energy for us. So what happens? How do we get energy? We eat carbon, right? Carbon-based foods. Carbohydrates, lipids, and when they go down into individual components, into sugars, and they break down further, the energy in them, in the chemicals, is obtained through the mitochondria. So this burning happens in the mitochondria. This energy, how you get energy happens in the mitochondria. But this energy, mitochondria can break down when you have too much of super refined carbohydrates. You're giving mitochondria too much energy. So when you give mitochondria too much energy, they break down. They cause superoxidation. But fruits and vegetables can counter that. So when you eat more fruits and vegetables, the mitochondria and its energy function is protected. In addition to that, there are other fiber compounds which can protect the mitochondria through supporting the good gut microbiome. So body also has good microbiome. So good compounds that protect the mitochondria, but also we have other components like fiber that feed our good bacteria. And so the good bacteria and the mitochondria protecting function from food give us good health. So this is missing in our current food system. When you go to the grocery aisle, they show you, oh, here is lipids, here is carbohydrates, here is proteins, here is minerals, and here is vitamins. They don't tell you about that it is a mitochondria that has to work hard to make you healthy. And so you need to feed that too. And you need to feed it with diverse good foods, like fruits and vegetables and beans. But instead of that, we get only refined foods and sugar and all of this. So if you look at our aisles, it's all sugar and carbohydrates. Right? So we need to protect our mitochondria, where our energy in every cell of our body is working to make us healthy, but also our good bacteria is making us healthy. So the mitochondria and the good bacteria, they are these ancient elements of our life forms. Okay? So mitochondria actually came from a previous microbiome that got engulfed. Okay? So this mitochondria and this good microbiome have to work together. So remember that good microbiome, the free-living microbial system in your body, and the mitochondria, which is an engulfed microbiome that came in and made our higher cell forms long ago. So mitochondria and microbiome are the two fundamental elements of our well-being that we need to feed every day, that we need to nurture every day, that needs us to be healthy. So remember this, mitochondria and the microbiome. Very easy, right? Two things. So those are helping those mitochondria and helping the microbiome is missing in our food system today. We need to correct that. So in our laboratory, when we design this food, we are trying to correct this bad oxidation or redox reactions of the mitochondria, and also have a good microbiome feed it and support it. Okay? So we are trying to put this logic all the way from growing crops to all the way to consumption. Every part of the ecology in which we grow food, our ancient ancestors understood this. That's why they nurtured the environment. They lived in harmony with all the animals and all the plants. And they had some good sense about this. So we need to nurture all the way from soil and soil health and plant health to all the way into when it comes into our body. We cannot look at it as an isolated system. It's an integrated system. It's a whole system. So this holistic understanding of food and health is important. And when we dig deep, we can see why. Because they have to feed these things that we do not see, the mitochondria. We can only see it through a microscope. Or the microbiome, we see it through the microscope. So these invisible elements are very central to our good health. Okay? So that's the take-home message today. Okay. Next slide, please. So if we now see people say nutrigenomics is only about gene interactions. No, it's about how the diet that we consume supports our metabolism, particularly at the mitochondria. And second, how this metabolism is influenced by the microbiome. Mitochondria, microbiome. So this diet that comes from the environment should be holistically built. It should be built, like our three sister crops, where we grow corn and beans and pumpkins in an integrated way. So when we eat that, we get all the good nutrients that can feed the mitochondria and feed the microbiome. So it's good for the environment because the beans feed the nitrogen for the corn. And then the pumpkin grows very well, and they grow on different layers of the soil and support the good microbiome for each other. So when they are in harmony, and when then we consume the three sister crops, we are healthy because our mitochondria can be better supported and our microbiome can be better supported. So we cannot forget our environment from which we get our food, because that's important as we study the cell system and our well-being. Next slide, please. So ecology is very important because that influences our genome, that influences our mitochondria, that influences the microbiome. So the environment from which we get our food influences us, affects us. Okay, I hope that point is clear. And therefore, this environment, if it breaks down, and we take bad food, for example, the Japanese, when they're in Japan, they take all these well-balanced beans, soybean and azuki bean and whole range of beans. And they have very low breast cancer in women and low prostate cancer in men. But when they come to Canada or Hawaii, their breast cancer rates shoot up. Why? Because now they're not eating the well-balanced food of the environment. Same thing when certain Mexican population come to the United States. In Mexico, they eat a lot of beans and a lot of well-balanced food. And the minute they're outside the environment, now they eat high calories, a lot of sugars, a lot of other high-calorie foods, and suddenly they have high diabetes. So our environment is very important, and how we nurture the food that we grow in the environment is very important. So protecting our mitochondria and protecting the microbiome is very important. Next slide, please. With this message, if you look at the 3 billion years of life on the planet, you can see mitochondrial-based life like you and me came along much later. But before that, we have this ancestral microbiome that was part of us. And later, one of them got engulfed and became this energy-generating component of our cell. And that itself is energy-generating for fungi, for animals like you and other animals, plants. And in addition, these other microbes also start interacting with us inside the microbiome and in nature. So this interaction is very important to create the web of food. So this food web that's created by this microbiome and other biological system is a holistic system. And when we look at this in a holistic way, then we can be more healthy. So that's the message. So we need to take clues from nature and then understand the complexity of how life emerged. And then we can create a balance for good health. Because we will always be a part of nature. And we have to live in harmony with nature. And that's the message too. We cannot have food divorced from nature. The more we go back to nature, the more it makes sense how we can live healthy and well. Next slide, please. So if you look at this, as I told you, one of the big breakdowns is the oxygen generating energy function in the mitochondria. It breaks down. So oxygen is so important for us. When we breathe, the food that we take through our mouth, then at the mitochondrial level, this food and the oxygen they meet up. When the oxygen that we breathe and what we eat through the mouth, they meet up in the mitochondria, that's how the energy is generated. That's where what we call the burning of our body, inside our body. So this mitochondrial burning, when what we breathe and what we eat in our mouth, when they meet up in the mitochondria in different cells for various functions, then the energy is generated. when we have too much calorie, then this breakdown can happen. So when we take too much food, carbohydrates to our mouth, and then our breathing is not right, and the breathing has pollutants and all sorts of bad things in the air pollution, or our breathing is improper, then the burning is improper. And with coupled to bad food or refined foods or too much carbohydrate, and when the burning goes haywire, then the cell breakdown happens. If it breaks down, it happens, it can affect cancer cell, cancer-related breakdowns, it can help liver damage, it can affect inflammation. So depending on where the cell damages, you get different types of organ breakdown, or we call it disease now, right? We give it different disease, heart disease, lung disease, inflammation disease. So, but basically what happens is, it happens when the burning in the mitochondria is not synchronized, or it breaks down, because the air we breathe is not right, or we don't breathe properly, or second, we take the wrong foods for burning to get our energy. So what we take in our mouth and what we breathe, both are very important. They have to be in synchrony. And further, the good microbiome has to support that. Next slide, please. So this oxygen, the breathing linked to mitochondria, is the most important part of how we need to liquid our contemporary diet. It's not all calories are the same. How those calories are burned in the mitochondria is very important. And so that is the new thinking, where we need to develop different combinations of food so that the mitochondria is protected. Next slide, please. So, take-home message from this is, in our environment where we live a sedentary life, and we take too many refined sugars, and we have all sorts of pollutants coming in the environment, and increased rates of diabetes and cardiovascular and cancer increasing. One of the best antidotes we can provide is all sorts of fruits and vegetables, including wild berries, the choke cherries, the wild raspberries, blueberries, plums, what we get in the grocery store, apples and pears, all of these fruits and vegetables, kale, spinach, all of these are good antidotes to fight these diseases that are coming from a high-calorie diets and bad environment, where the mitochondria is always in trouble. So when the mitochondria is in trouble, we need to help it. And the way we help it is eat more fruits and vegetables. And when we eat more fruits and vegetables, it also feeds a good bacteria, but it also helps the mitochondria. So mitochondria, the microbiome turns on good reactions with these fruits and vegetables because they have high fiber that the microbiome needs. And they work well with the fruits and vegetables, and they support the mitochondria to be healthy, to then give you longevity and quality of life. Okay? So, next slide, please. So when we look at this oxygen function, you can see nature is very clever. Nature has many reproductive and stress responses in the environment to live in this environment, because it's standing stationary. It has to fight standing stationary, and it fights so well because this oxygen is coming at it, carbon dioxide is fixing its own food, but what it does also, it fights the bad reactions of the mitochondria themselves. They make these amazing series of compounds, especially in the leaves, in the fruits, all these reproductive structures and different parts of the organs in which they have to advance in nature, in the roots, in different parts. So when they have all of these reactions in nature, they produce these protective compounds for the mitochondria. So when we eat them, we also benefit. So when we eat those compounds that the plants make to adapt to stress environment, they also support us. So you can see how close this plant and plant interaction is important to us. And the same way, when we feed the animals with these foods, the animals are healthy. And then when we eat the animals, we are healthy too. And therefore, this nature cycle has to be balanced. And it starts with understanding how plants interact. They have their own reactions, producing these amazing number of compounds. And also, they are supported by the good microbiome, which then comes into our food. When we ferment, yeah, when we process them, they come into our food. Our ancestors knew about it, and they used them to preserve food and make food more palatable, make food more healthy. And therefore, we can take these nature's reactions and nature's microbiome interactions and design better food for us. So that is how we are looking at things. Next slide, please. With this kind of logic, we looked at different species of plants around the world. The mint family, oregano, thyme. There are so many even in our communities here in the Great Plains. There are so many mints that are very good. Bergamot. They make tea. Our ancestors made tea out of that. Yeah. So when we drink those tea, they give us good antioxidants, good compounds to protect the mitochondria. So many of these herbal teas were very valuable. Many of the beans have these good protective compounds. A lot of the fruits have these protective compounds. So, for example, they made a buffalo jerky with the choke cherry, yeah? Wasna, it's called. So they all had this wisdom to bring these wonderful plants into the food they ate to make it more healthy. Wild grain, medicinal plants. So different parts of the world, in their own nature, built these different food components to keep us healthy. Only in the recent times when we industrialized, we just focused on carbohydrate and refined these foods and didn't look at the nature to guide us. And therefore, we are getting sick now. Next slide, please. So we have looked at a range of healthy compounds in different foods, and then we are testing them in what disease applications they can be looked at. So how our traditional food is valuable in countering some of the disease. And so we have many assays for diabetes, for bad bacteria. So all of these different assays helps us to screen which of these foods are very good, which of them can counter disease, which can protect the mitochondria, which can support the good microbiome. So we screen them with our different assays. And one big class of compounds we are looking at is a class called phenolics. They are antioxidants. They can protect the mitochondria. They can support the good microbiome too. So we think that's a very important class of compounds to be enriched in our diet through fruits and vegetables. Not as pills, but as real foods. Next slide. So we have many techniques to develop them further for gardening. For example, one of our PhD students, Jacob, he's making an indigenous garden where he's looking at the indigenous food crops with these health benefits. And in addition, adding other good fruits and vegetables like kale so that we enrich it with as many plants and good foods that we can to make a healthy garden. And so we want to bring these healthy gardens to the Great Plains, to our different indigenous community. And in this healthy garden, we not only have all the different plants, plant foods and foods that the indigenous community have found in their own journey, but also we adding other good foods, plants, healthy tomatoes, healthy kale, so that you have a wide choice to choose from. Next slide, please. So with these, we are isolating nice oregano that's very healthy with high antioxidants. Next slide. We are generating sprouts that when you stimulate them during sprouting, they make these good compounds to protect the mitochondria and feed the good microbiome. So we have many techniques to stimulate these compounds. before processing them into food. Next slide, please. And so don't worry about this busy slide. This is just that many of my PhD students study this. They study how these compounds are made in these different plants. Is it made in roots and leaves, and how are they made? What are the pathways that are important? So for your purpose, you just remember that plants have many metabolic reactions to make all of these compounds. And studying them is important. And so I hope some of you come on later to do your master's research and PhD research, at which time you can study these different pathways of how these different plants make these compounds. Okay? And we can study them in the indigenous plants. You know, these three sister crops, we study them. Pumpkin. How does pumpkin make blood pressure inhibiting compounds? So using these pathways, we can follow them. So for now, just remember, while the plants look simple on the outside, they are made up of many reactions. And we do study those reactions. And as you get excited about this food, and as you get excited about studying more and doing masters and PhD, you have many wonderful things to study further. Okay? So just ignore the busy slide, but at least I hope this busy slide inspires you to come and pursue your PhD later. And therefore, we are applying all of this knowledge now to trying to solve diabetes problem. As you know, diabetes is the fastest growing, non-infectious, non-communicable disease. That means we do not get this disease by any infection. We get it because of our bad eating habits, our lifestyle. Because of this lifestyle, we need to start rethinking and going back to the wisdom of our ancestors of growing these foods in a holistic, good way. And now we have a good scientific platform of understanding the mitochondria and the microbiome to guide us. So using this guidance of more knowledge, we can now say our ancestors had a lot of wisdom. Our three sisters crops had a lot of wisdom. And so how can we now build this into our modern diets? How can we build our indigenous knowledge into modern diet? And we can. And we know how now. We know the path. And so we have applied this whole food strategies for lifestyle changes and improvements so we can better combat type 2 diabetes. Next slide, please. So if you see today, it's a big problem. 400 million in the world are having diabetes. By 2030, 500 million. This is a lot. The fastest growing disease in the world. US alone, we are 33 million in 2011. Now it's close to about 40 million people, nearly 10% of our population. And this is underreporting. Many have pre-diabetes. 1/3 have pre-diabetes. And in indigenous populations, we are suffering more. And so this is not right. So we need to fight it because it's taking too much away from the quality of our life and too much away from our healthcare costs, okay, and overall costs. Next slide, please. So we can fight it with good foods. And when we understand how our body works and how and where we need to control the sugar and what else should we add in the food so that not take drugs to fight these sugar imbalance, but instead of drugs, find foods that can fight this. And there are many foods that can control the sugar and the sugar increase. So in our laboratory, we are working to screen these good foods that can fight the sugar rise naturally, especially in the early stage of the disease. Okay? That's where the good fruits and vegetables come in. Next slide, please. And therefore, for glucose control and the cells that make insulin and the oxygen mitochondrial breakdown in important cells that distribute the glucose and the cells that are associated with blood pressure, all of these can be made healthy with the good compounds, with the good dietary compounds. So that's the goal. So ultimately, all of these different cells also have mitochondria because they all need energy. So that mitochondria, if we protect the mitochondria everywhere, we can protect all of these important cells. Next slide, please. So, for example, here we are finding that the wild rices and then the black non-traditional Japonica rice or the black rice, they all have higher amount of these disease-fighting compounds, the diabetes-fighting compounds, than the white rice that we get in the store. So you should be eating more of your wild rice. You should, because they have more fiber and more of these antidotes. So here is an example of that. It has more antioxidants. And it has more of this phenolic compound, which we attribute it as the antioxidant. So that's, here's an example. Next slide, please. So if you go, many of our mint, sage, chocolate mint, oregano, balms, in the Great Plains, many of the species in this family are rich. They make tea. Ancestors used to make tea out of them. What we're finding is they're rich in antioxidants. They're rich in these sugar-fighting compounds. Okay, so when we drink those tea, we can get control of our sugar. Okay? So even the regular tea and coffee have rich amount of these compounds. But so also are the herbs of the Great Plains. So we have a visiting scholar from India who is studying these different mints for their anti-diabetes properties. Okay? Our ancestors were so wise in using this, and they had less disease. Next slide, please. So likewise, berries and legumes and mints and onions and cucurbits, cucumber and pumpkins, squash, pepper, carrot. They can not only slow down the glucose, but they also have blood pressure fighting compounds. And we can show that. And we sort of target at different sites. The same site where the drugs are targeted, we can find some of those compounds in our everyday foods. So just low doses of them every day with these good fruits and vegetables can help us fight it. Yeah? So we can stay away from these pills. In fact, I'm doing that. I was, a year and a half ago, they asked me to go on a blood pressure reducing pill. But I took more fruits and vegetables and managed it that way. So 2 months ago, my doctor pulled me off my blood pressure pills. And he said, stay with your fruits and vegetables. And I measure my blood pressure every day. And I'm maintaining my blood pressure just with fruits and vegetables, following the advice that I'm giving you now. Okay, so next. So likewise, one of my PhD students from Korea, he studied our wonderful three sister crops, corn, bean, pumpkin, and he found that there is a lot of anti-diabetic and anti-blood pressure compounds in that food, in these three sister crops. And he studied different combinations. And we published this in a journal called Journal of Medicinal Food. Next slide, please. See, look at the wonderful diversity of colors they have. Colored corn, colored beans, and all the pumpkins and squashes. So when we put them together, we have so many healthy compounds. And now we are finding not only these healthy compounds for us, for fighting blood pressure and glucose, but they also feed the good bacteria. They have good fiber. So they not only fight these disease pathways, but they also support the good bacteria. So this three sister crop wisdom is wonderful. So we studied other traditional foods of the indigenous community, like quinoa in South America, purple corn, Andean. You can see, wow, they have a lot of antioxidant activity. Wow, they have good anti-diabetic properties. So this particular enzyme is a key enzyme for the sugar to be taken up in a certain cell type. And when we block that with the food intake or with drugs, and when we inhibit them, then the sugar uptake is slowed down so that the sugar load is lowered. But what's wonderful, we can find these compounds in these traditional foods. So that's very exciting. And likewise, you see there are many different pumpkins, and we are finding very specific pumpkin 1, pumpkin 5, pumpkin 6. They have blood pressure inhibiting properties. And so when we look at those pumpkin and bring it into a soup or a food matrix, then we can get those blood pressure inhibiting compounds. Next slide. Likewise, one of my students from Peru, she studied the indigenous grain of the Andes and found that these indigenous crops had a lot of anti-diabetic properties. So we can now combine them and build better foods, right? Healthy foods. Next slide. Beans from Peru and Brazil, same thing. Yeah, those traditional varieties are rich in these anti-diabetic properties, and we don't eat them. What do? We eat all refined flour, refined sugar, refined salt, and make foods out of them. We should be eating more of our ancient grains. Our ancestors ate a lot of this. Next slide, please. Likewise, in India, a lot of beans are eaten and eggplant. And what we are finding is these traditional varieties of eggplant and beans have a lot of anti-diabetic properties. And what do we do now? We eat more refined food, refined bread, flat bread, instead of eating, or with potatoes, instead of eating these traditional food that the ancestors ate, and they're healthy. Next slide. So here we screened these different types of eggplants and found these properties. Next slide. And we found certain skin were better than the pulp. In some cases the pulp was better, in some cases the skin was better. And now the next important part. It's clear that in many parts of the world, the microbes, the fungi or the bacteria, they interact with our foods. And some of these interactions help to bake the food and preserve the food. But what we are finding now is some of those same bacteria inhabit our system, inhabit our body, inhabit our gut, especially the lactic acid bacteria. So this lactic acid bacteria that came with the food sometime in the past became the beneficial colonizers. They worked with our host, with our gut, and then worked to process the food well and keep us healthy. Now we are learning that these fermented foods and the microbiome we get through yogurts and fermented food like kimchi of Korea and different types of fermented food, vegetables. Okay, so all over the world there are a lot of fermented foods, and those fermented foods can bring this good bacteria and make your gut healthy, and then work with your food that you consume and help your mitochondria and makes us healthy and builds our immunity, builds our digestive process, distributes our sugar well, and gives us better mental faculties and better overall health, better lungs, better blood distribution. Yeah? So all the good compounds are made to keep each cell healthy. Next slide, please. So as we see, using this idea, we can make a blueberry soy yogurt that is healthier, right? So we can bring this into current food and make it more healthy. Okay, next slide. Likewise, some student designed a soy cranberry-based drink with the lactic acid bacteria that can also inhibit the ulcer bacteria. So we can fight the bad bacteria that cause ulcer, but the good bacteria can be maintained. Okay? So we can take an ancient cranberry that indigenous communities of Massachusetts and the East Coast developed, and when we blend it with that old Chinese soybean, we can make a new drink that supports good bacteria, but the wisdom of our ancestors. So likewise, in Brazil, we are taking a special fruit called camu camu, and we extract their compounds, and then we ferment them with soy milk, and then we make all sorts of these healthy compounds for diabetes and also fighting the good bacteria. or inhibiting the blood pressure pathway. So from these fermentations, we not only change the compounds to good compounds, but also bring in the good bacteria that we need for good health. Next. So likewise, we can take apple. We had students who made apple juice based beverages with this good bacteria. So when we eat the drink, we also not only get compounds that are antioxidant and support the mitochondria, but also we bring the good bacteria into our system. Okay, we do two things in one design. Next slide. So you can see this apple juice has blood pressure, anti-diabetic properties. One of the enzymes that breaks the starch can be slowed down. This way, the glucose release is slow. Next slide. So we have other things like cherry. When it's fermented with a certain bacteria, we can get anti-diabetic properties. Next slide. Same thing, they can inhibit the ulcer bacteria. So this is more of it with pear juice. So we can now design with any kind of fruit base. And so here is another busy slide that you don't have to worry. What we do is we see how are these compounds working in cells similar to us, like the yeast, or we have a worm, and we study this worm where we can cut the worm and the worm grows back its head. And when we give that some sort of a stress, the head growing back is slow. But when we give our good compounds, the head growing back is normal. So this way, we determine if the good compounds are helping our biological process beneficially. So we have a worm model and a yeast model to study it. So again, here this busy slide, don't worry about it. But many of you want to do masters and PhD at NDSU. You can start studying how are these compounds working in our body. What are they affecting? How are they affecting? So this is the excitement waiting for you when you come here. Okay, same thing. We have other models in cancer model to study this. Again, this is a busy slide. Don't worry about it. But it's just testing how are these different compounds that we eat then affecting our cell type. Next slide. So using this kind of logic, we are now designing better diet and nutrients from a good environment with a good microbiome so that our metabolism, particularly mitochondria and the microbiome, is healthy. So when we keep our mitochondria and our good bacteria healthy, we can be healthy. Okay? And so we need to eat more fruits and vegetables to keep the mitochondria healthy and our microbiome healthy. So if we can do that, then our gene expression is normal, we have normal cell growth, the cell transduction to keep the cells happy is all normal. Okay? The cells do not get diseased. They stay normal. Okay? That's the take-home message. So food and health is important. We are now taking this whole food logic and building collaborations all over the world to try and have each community build their own security in their own local ecology, with their own local foods, with their own local tastes. So this way, each locality has their own advantage to build their own security. So this can add value to economic development. Yeah? Local economic development, local gardens and local berries can be developed. So we can have local economic development based on our local foods. Okay? So this not only improves food security and health by feeding good microbiome, helping our mitochondria, but we can make these valuable foods and surplus we can put it into the economic system. Okay? So we can build economic value too, in addition to our good health and well-being. So building healthy communities with healthy economies is important, and therefore we have sort of a system approach where we study the plant, how do you make products, how you can make some food design out of it so that it can be healthy. So by having these 4 steps, we can help local economic development and have the local communities build their own food base. And then anything we do not have, we can import. But at the same time, we have our security. We're not dependent on others for everything. Okay? So this model can be the discovery engine for new economic development in our own local community, not just health only. Next. So with this kind of systems or whole food approach, we can have a better community nutrition and better health, better community economic development. So we hope to bring this to our Great Plains communities here in Ojibwe, in Standing Rock and Turtle Mountain. So we want to bring this to our communities because our communities have history of good foods in their own local world. And so we want to build a science-based strategy for this. And we want the young minds to understand this, come here to NDSU and work with our public health program and our partners in the Global Institute, which is we are part of that. We work together and we want to bring all this science and training, but also this economic development platform to our communities. So that's my last slide. And if you have questions, you can send them along. And I hope to visit your community soon. I have already visited Standing Rock, and we visit Ojibwe here in Minnesota, but we also would like to come to all the other communities and work with you. And of course, many of you